Welcome back to Lawfully Told, the podcast where we share real legal journeys, the ones that don't always follow the traditional blueprint. Today's episode is all about taking non-traditional paths and trusting your instincts along the way. I'm really excited to be joined by Brian, whose career challenges a lot of the assumptions people have about what a legal career is supposed to look like. Thank you so much for being here, and let's get into it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Excited.
No problem. I always like to start at the beginning because everyone ends up in the law for different reasons, and those early motivations usually say a lot. So, to kick things off, what initially motivated you to pursue a career in law?
Sure. It will be lame, but the short answer is money. Um, but the longer answer is I was coming out of undergrad with a writing degree, which is pretty virtually useless for getting a job. Even back in 2015, there wasn't really journalism. So I kind of had to think about what I wanted to do after that. So I was working a high-end sales job, like expensive speakers, stuff like that. So I had a lot of wealthy clients, which included lawyers and because I have the writing degree background, I figured that would be helpful. Um, and so it was just kind of okay, I'm going to go the law route um, to kind of get out of retail and do something with my writing degree and just take the next step. Um, and yeah, that's kind of it. It's not a noble. It was not a noble pursuit at the start, but that is what drew me into
Yeah.
law.
Absolutely. And I've heard a lot from other lawyers saying that writing and reading is the basis of any sort of work when it comes to writing briefs or even if you're in, again, in-house counsel. So it's great you had that experience. And again, money, that's a big contributing factor that even us students really relate to. So thinking back to those early days, going again to the earlier part, what moments helped shape the direction you wanted to take in your legal career?
Yeah, so I mean, like I was doing high end sales. So it was a lot of financial folks because I was in Connecticut at the time. So in the Fairfield County area, it was people who worked in New York, on Wall Street. So it was a lot of like financial lawyers if it was an attorney or a corporate lawyer, and I can be a little socially awkward. So I didn't think I was going to go into like the courtroom was never going to be something I considered. It's just not who I am. And so I was like, okay, corporate law is probably the way can go because you're almost more so than any other lawyerly role. If you're in a corporation, you're playing a role. So for someone who's just a little socially awkward like me, I was like, okay, that's probably the route. And I've always been good with numbers, so I was like, okay, if I can lean into the business side, um, that's the route. And with my writing background, I was like, okay, something that's a little more writing intensive or reading intensive too would be great. So I never really considered anything outside of like either financial or corporate, generally law. But those were like the early steps as I just kind of thought through. I was like, that seems like the place I want to end up if I go down the route of going to law school. Um, it's just something where corporate business, something with numbers and reading and writing and all that. Hope that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And it's great that you were able to gauge your interest and see that, oh, I'm good at numbers. Oh, I'm good at writing. So that's the thing that all of us students wants to do is to merge all our interests to hopefully find our dream job. Yeah. So
Yes.
you're, huh?
Oh, I was just gonna say, and just know you don't have to be a super outgoing person to be a lawyer. Yeah,
Exactly.
that's it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite things about the law is that there's so many pathways and career opportunities that's fit for every single mind and every single type of person. Yeah. Your path into law school wasn't completely traditional. And I think that perspective is especially helpful for students who feel pressured to rush through everything. So, before law school even started, you took a gap year between undergrad and law school. How did that experience shape you going into law school or any type of career?
Yeah. So, like I had said, I was working while I was in undergrad. I kind of wanted to try to avoid that as much as possible in law school. So, taking the gap year was less like a decision based on like education or like living life for a little bit, more like, oh, let me save money. Um, so really, all it did is it let me save money, so I didn't have to work through law school, and I could make internship decisions based on what I wanted to do versus, oh, I got to get the one that pays the most, or I got
Mm.
to. You're just making decisions, and so really, all it gave me was time to just do school, which I hadn't done through all of undergrad. I worked full time the whole time. Well, except for the first September, and then after that, I worked full time the whole time for undergrad. So, yeah, I mean, it was just that was just financial and letting me decide, or letting me just focus on school. But like that said, I knew a ton of people in law school who took gap years, or so. One of my best friends from law school was in the military for 20 years and then went. And so going right in, it's like, yeah, that's the normal. You graduate at 25 from law school and be a lawyer, but I recommend to everyone take some time to just live a little, and even if it's just a year.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the takes that you said that undergrad and law school are really expensive. So seeing that many people take that gap year not only to make money, like you said, but also live a little life, which is something I'm sure is really important when you're doing from high school and then straight to undergrad and then again to law
Mm-hmm.
school. So
Work
yeah.
90 hours for some people.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Working too. Yeah. But I have to ask, once you got there, you took a pretty ambitious challenge. So what led you to pursue your JD and your MBA at the same time?
So actually, that came about from one client I had at my sales job. I was just talking to about like career advice, and he's managed a hedge fund, but he said today a bachelor's degree is the equivalent of an MBA, or an MBA is the equivalent of what a bachelor's degree used to be, where it's kind of like, okay, that's just the base level degree for getting into business. Um, and because I knew I wanted to not necessarily be, law firm or courtroom, I was like, I should get an MBA. And then a number of schools, I went to the University of Connecticut, which I don't know if you can read it, but they offer a program where you can do both at the same time. As to do like some other schools, I know NYU did, and there's a number that you can get both at the same time. So they offer programs that you can do it together without having to like really kill yourself. I mean, it's a lot of work, but um, yeah. So it was really just like, hey, I know I want to go business, so I might as well get the MBA, and it has helped. But yeah, it was good, and yeah, it's not really again not really a complicated answer for why I did it, but just to make it easier to go into the business world.
Yeah, that's great. And I know it's super rare to find these sort of like programs, and it's great that you were able to utilize it to find both your interests and combine them in the future.
Mhm.
Yeah, so being in two demanding programs at once, I'm sure is no small thing. So what was the biggest challenge of completing both programs simultaneously?
The workload,
Mhm.
but so like UConn, at least how it's set up there, it's like year one, you just do the normal first year of law school. Then year two, you start to do both simultaneously. Fortunately, like because it's a program through the school, some credits transfer over between them. But there were semesters where I was doing over 20, I think 23 credits is the max I hit in for grad school. Um, in one semester. So that's the hard part. From some other like perspectives, like sometimes keeping the rules straight in your head, because like for example, like tax rules and accounting rules are different because tax cares about cash, and accounting rules care more about like amortization and stuff like that.
Mhm.
So it's just different treatments of money that you have to keep straight. So that doesn't happen too much. And then for me, because I was at UConn, the schools were in the same place. They were like 20 minutes apart, both in Hartford, Connecticut. So you just have to when you're making your schedule, go, oh, can't really get there in time, depending on the time of day or whatever. So the workload, but it's manageable. Like so, that program also had med students who were doing the dual degree. So we would all the law schools med students would hang out and just go, hey, this is a lot of work, but I had a good study group, and it really helped. cut down on that because one side is law, which is they're two different, very different mental stuff. Business school is a lot more math and, you know, I call it like the feeling stuff if you're talking about the managerial classes versus law school is much more heavily logic, like reasoning based. That both have some elements of each.
Yeah, that's great. And it's good that you found peers that are like in mindset, which you could study from. And again, workload is no small task. And seeing how you powered through and then were able to get a job in in-house counsel is again very inspiring for us, the younger generation. One more follow-up question. Would you recommend this type of program to students?
Yes, I would. I To be honest, like the business school is kind of a nice break compared to the law school. At least for me, if you want, I mean, like if you're interested in pursuing law, but you do like math and maybe the business side of the world more, yes, I 100% recommend it. It gave me a good perspective and like there's certain classes like I can't say there's any like law school classes where I take lessons into my everyday life, but I can say that with the business school that there's certain things where I've taken where I just think about it in everyday life, like operations management. So yeah, highly recommend it. I think it makes you a more well-rounded um, attorney. Yeah,
Yeah, that's great how you were able to take these, I would say, like tiny nitty-gritty business assignments into your everyday life and really utilize what you learned through this program. Yeah, but this is where your story really starts to stand out because, again, your career path didn't follow the traditional post-grad script. So after graduating, you didn't go straight into legal practice. So what did that transitional period look for you?
yeah. So I mean, for reference, I graduated in the middle of COVID, like it was 2020. So everything was still being figured out and it was like there was lockdown. So I ended up moving back home with my parents after I graduated, just because finding a job was difficult. And then I had some bad experiences interviewing with law firms where it was like, oh, absolutely no remote work, about, stuff like that. And I was like, well, I'm living with my grandfather who's immunocompromised, right? So so there's that portion. Then I was like, I never fell in love with any part of law coming out. Like I was kind of waiting, where some other people, like they were like, oh, family law, that's what I want to do, or litigation, or whatever it is. And I was just kind of like, I gravitated way more to the business side of stuff. So yeah, I just went out searching for something I could do with my law degree that wasn't exactly being a lawyer. Which I ended up not finding it. It ended up finding me. I took a recruiter that I met through someone I knew from business school. Suggested a sourcing role, which is just you're doing like commercial negotiations on like business to business contracts. So I was doing that for a financial company called Voya. Um, so I was able to do that remotely and do yeah, just kind of business negotiations. And then one day, because of my background, they put me on a research project, and I was like, oh, you know what? No, like ownership rights for contract. I was like, oh, you know what? Let's go do law, because it kind of reignited my passion for it that had died off a little during COVID.
That's great. And obviously, I was in third grade in
Yeah,
COVID, but obviously, it was a hard time for all of us. And seeing how you were able to persevere and eventually get a job that suited your interest, um, is a great and awe-inspiring thing to hear. One of the most unique parts was that you never worked at a traditional law firm, like you said, and went straight to in-house. How did that impact your career and help you land your first in-house attorney role?
didn't. It made it way more difficult. It was way harder having no because it wasn't just that I had no law firm experience. I had no like experience in a legal role other than my internships, which I did too at the Connecticut Attorney General's office. So I was kind of trying to get a in-house role with nothing essentially on my resume other than some practical business negotiations and then your normal law school. Um, things. So, and I'm living in South Carolina right now for my fiance's work, and there's just not a lot of um, business law here. It's a lot of family law, stuff. I'm tort like injury law. So I
Mm.
was working remote or looking primarily remote in corporate law with no experience. So all of that is a recipe for like transitioning careers kind of. So all of that is a recipe for making it difficult. I won't share the actual count of applications, but it was high. And so, yeah, no, definitely didn't make it easier. Made it more for sure more difficult.
Yeah, definitely. I know the job market right now in general is not quite looking the best, and seeing how everyone goes through multiple applications and these hardships gives us courage to kind of go out into the world and present ourselves. And again, you stated how working remote impacted your law firm jobs and jobs in general. I have to ask you, do you think working remote is going to extend in the long run or shorten?
Um, I think hybrid will be more the name of the game. So, and well, specifically in the legal field, it's hard to say. Um, I mean, you're in Texas and they've had recent news with the bar, and feel free to edit this out if you don't want this mentioned. But,
No, no, no.
you know,
I heard about them like splitting from the bar association and all that.
yeah, so like you're gonna have okay firms or like businesses in Texas who are gonna still want attorneys who are bar licensed. It's not gonna like that desire. I don't think is gonna go away. And if other states follow suit, I think you'll see a push to remote hiring attorneys in those states. Like it just kind of opens you up for a little bit more of like finding the right talent. And I think people are starting to realize that a little more, but I do think hybrid is the way it will go. It would be harder with first time attorneys and stuff to not be in person, especially in a law firm. From my understanding, I never worked there, but I think remote or hybrid, sorry, is the way to is more of the future because a lot of the times I'm reading stuff all day and I'll have like a couple meetings. It's like do I have to be in the office for that? Um, so yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad because the legal world is always changing, even though it's been rooted since like the beginning of time. So to see this change between hybrid in person and all this sort of work types. So it's great to hear that a lawyer's perspective on where it's gonna be at. So, a lot of law students assume that not starting at a firm is a mistake. I fall guilty to this too. But what do you think they often misunderstand about taking a quote unquote different path?
well, the one that you can do it, like it's possible. It's not impossible. Like I obviously did it, and I mean, there's some other circumstances around that, and I think we'll talk about that a little bit later. But like you can do it, and it's just more of what you want out of your career. I think law firm right is the more traditional route. That's how you go up to partner or you found your own firm after a few years or whatever you want to do. Where it's like my side is you're gonna be corporate and it's kind of I think like a little bit of a club where once you're in it, like that's kind of what you're gonna keep doing. Where if you're in a firm, right, you're gonna probably stay in a firm and then you can shift out later. Where I think in house it's more like okay, you've been in house and once you um, are in house, you find out how awesome it is, and you want to stay in house. We had visiting attorneys in my ethics class in law school, um, all from all different practices, and one of them was a guy who's done in house forever, and our teacher kept being like, "Well, what are the downsides?" And he was like, "There's none. It's great, but I guess the downsides maybe is like at the high end, like top earning potential potentially." But that's I think if you're getting to the really really like high end of um, law firms and big law, where you're like if you're owning your own big law firm, like right, you're going to make more money than most in-house counsels. But at the like mid-career, low career, or whatever, it's going to be very similar. And I guess the other thing is like, granted, I wasn't coming directly out of law school, but like during my interview process, no one was asking me questions about like what journal did I do in law school, or no one really said it. It was like more like, you know, do I know what I'm talking about enough to have a conversation, and am I going to be able to do the actual job? And it's like, okay, am I going to get along with people? And then the last thing is like, am I practical? Because the business is going to care a lot about taking a very practical approach to law, and we can get more into that. But like, so it's like, yeah, it's possible, and it's just like it's a different kind of almost job and role in my view.
Yeah, absolutely. And you stated how there's like hard and soft skills included and how business is more practical. And I think that sort of differs to stuff in the law since it's more, I think, conversational and more, I think, like soft skill based interacting with clients. So it's good to see the differentiating factor between business school and law school and how you were able to find your calling in the business side. So once you're in-house, the work and mindset can look very different from what people imagine when they're in law school, like I stated. So from your experience from both sides of the business and legal world, how does transactional and corporate work differ from when you're in-house or at a law firm?
Yeah, right. Okay, okay, great. So I've never worked in the law firm. I have friends who have, but I've worked with outside counsel enough to kind of speak to what I've seen from outside counsel and talking to my friends and stuff like that. So outside counsel, I will say. So I do a lot of contract work, where like I'm redlining, editing contracts, doing negotiations, and back and forth. Whenever I see outside counsel, they have way more edits than I make. I don't know, like maybe that comes down to okay, we're getting paid by the hour, but yes, it's always way more edits, way more combative of a negotiation style that I don't take um, kind of working in house. And there's reasons for that. And like, I'm sure you are already aware, but most in-house counsel teams are small. They're lean because if something ever happens that's like you need significant legal resources, most corporations are going to go, okay, we'll hire outside counsel for this effort, but it's not necessary on a day-to-day basis. So I'm the only person who does my job at my company. My boss does something similar, but it is different. So I have a view of like the entire scope of what needs to get done. I can point at each thing, go, well, that's like the most important thing I have to get done. That's less so. Um, and it comes with being able to make, I guess, some calls that are like, hey, okay, this part of this negotiation isn't as important, or the business need, like this contract really just needs to get done. And because I'm in house and it's kind of all under one umbrella, in my view, I don't always take as harsh of a approach to a contract. I'm like, okay, we can live with that. That's what we need to fight on. And I think when you're so it's kind of like a forest through the trees, like seeing the forest through the trees type thing. Where it's like I'm looking at the whole forest all the time, and maybe if you're hiring outside counsel, you're at a law firm, you're seeing little bits of a bunch of different companies. Where I'm seeing the whole thing of one company, if that makes sense. So there's always a lot more edits. Um, the second thing is I'm not chasing billable hours. I don't have to meet that, which comes with the benefits of working on things that are outside of like the normal contracting stuff. So like I am producing, like I'm making a series of trainings for non-legal folks. I try to influence like policy and like that's in the company itself. Um, so there's just opportunities to kind of where it's like, okay, yeah, I'm not billing, or this wouldn't count as a billable hour if it was a traditional client, but it's work I'm still doing that's valuable, and it's nice to not have to chase down, and I can focus on if there is an important negotiation, I can drill down on that. And the one thing that's big for me is it's in-house, you get to pick your client. Like you're not going to get to pick your client if you're going into a law firm, especially as a junior associate. You're working for whoever hires the firm and whoever talks to you. So for me, it was very important. I always wanted to work for like good companies, quote unquote, right? Someone who I believed was at least trying to put good out into the world. And so in house, like I got to pick. Well, they have to pick me too, right? There's a lot of interviews you go through, but you get to pick. Um, and then So I have a bunch on this question. So the next one, like I work with probably a lot more non-legal folks than your typical in-house attorney does, or sorry, your law firm attorney does. And with that comes you have to be able to explain well law and concepts and why things are important and matter to non-legal folks. So you have to kind of, strip away kind of all the legalese and the bullshit that comes with it and just go, this is the core of why it matters. This is what it is. Like, you know, like that. So there's a lot of that that I think you definitely get less of at a law firm. Um, and then it's kind of the you wear many different hats too thing where it's like at a law firm, that law firm specializes, it's getting hired for a reason. They're going to have different departments. In an in-house, it's a smaller team, and issues that crop up don't always fall neatly in someone's bucket. So a lot of the times they're going, hey, today you're doing this, which is kind of fun. They're like, hey, we have this issue. Can you try to, figure it out? And there's not always someone to pass it off to. So that's the fun part too, because you never know exactly what problem might pop up that you're going to work on.
Yeah, that's great. And I love how you elaborate so much on the specific capabilities of in-house counsel. So the main idea that I'm kind of getting is that in-house counsel is way better and you get much more personal liberty, especially because you're your own boss. You're the only person specializing.
Well,
Well,
yeah,
figuratively.
sure.
Figuratively, you're your own boss and you're the only person really specializing in your type of field compared to someone who's outside counsel. And I couldn't imagine being like billed per hour. I think I would go insane. But yeah, so it's good to see how you have the flexibility and you could really choose on what issues and what clients and what really you're working on, which kind of fuels your motivation, I'm sure, in the general aspect of the law. So my next question is, you also bring a strong business background with your legal role. So which skills from your business or indirect sourcing experience have been most valuable in your career?
Practical negotiations, like I was like kind of boots on the ground in my sourcing role, and the in-house counsel when I was in that role was always kind of a little reluctant to get on calls. So I try to be a little bit better about getting on calls now that I have, I'm in walking those shoes. But yeah, I mean, it's just really the practical business experience and experience in the corporate world and just learning a little bit more about how that works and how people operate and talk and, you know, who to send the email to kind of is a learned skill sometimes. Um, so yeah, no, just the actually getting practical business experience where I had a view of business needs and timing because you sometimes like as an attorney you're going to be want to be I want this contract perfect and then it's like well but you don't have enough time to make it perfect so it's like how do you deal with that so I learned more of that and yeah just corporate life learning who to email looking at the org chart and knowing okay this is who I'm supposed to email to actually get results.
Yeah, that's such a valuable skill because emails happen every day, every second, every time. I know we talked over emails, so
Yeah,
it's a great thing to know who and where to contact, and also negotiation skills, which I'm sure are incredibly valuable in the corporate sort of company or the corporate lifestyle.
yeah.
So, before fully going in-house, you also had public sector exposure. So, how did your internship at the Connecticut Attorney General's office influence your perspective on legal work?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I mean, it definitely made me less rigid. I was working in the consumer protection department I did it twice. So the first time I did in the consumer protection department, loved my boss, and then the attorney general switched, and she got a promotion. So she invited me back for my second summer. And then, so we were just in the kind of administrative department then, working on a lot of different things. So it just made me less rigid because every day I was working on something different. Sometimes, especially in the second um, batch, it was just like, hey, you're going to help out this department today or this department. So you're just jumping all over. And it taught me like sometimes it's just about diving into research and learning because sometimes the other attorneys don't know the answer. Even like, they're just like, hey, find this out. And I'm like, well, would anyone else in here know? And they're like, probably not. Just figure it out. So you kind of learn. It taught me how to be less rigid, and the attorneys, I think, on some degree, were just because they were working public sector and they just wanted to do some good. Were happier to do the work than some attorneys I had like interviewed with or interacted with um, in the private sector who were a little bit harder on, I think, in the internship interviews at least. So yeah, no, it was nice to work in a place where people were just kind of happy to try to help, you know, the constituents that they supported. So yeah, just that and the rigidity thing and being able to jump around.
Yeah, absolutely. Learning how to be flexible and diversify your skills and your interests is a great thing to learn, especially when you're so diversified when it comes to your knowledge with your business and law degree. Kind of going based on this internship, did you do any other internships that really shaped your pathway?
No, I just did those two during law. So I mean, you kind of only do two in law school. You do the first summer and then the second summer. So yeah, it was just those two because again, in undergrad I worked full time, so there was no internships
Yeah.
going then.
What company did you work for all of undergrad?
Oh, a bunch. It was a lot of retail.
Oh,
Forever 21 to start, which was
oh,
a short-lived. Uh, Target, Best Buy, Michaels for a day. The craft store. So yeah, it was a wide variety of generally retail, which
yeah, that's great.
yeah,
Yeah, because I feel that like waitress and retail experience is the best way to communicate and meet new people. I teach at Kumon, so which is like a learning center. So I love to interact with kids, and it's great that you got that experience too.
yeah, and it's good for teaching you to not take things personally because sometimes people are just having a bad day and it kind of helps you
Yeah,
get away
absolutely.
from it. Yeah,
Definitely.
yeah.
So I always like to wrap up with a reflection because hindsight tends to bring the best insights, and your career definitely involves some bold choices. So looking back now, what's one career decision that felt risky at the time but ultimately paid off?
I think it's been how picky I've been with where I work, and
Mm.
I wasn't applying to like anything I saw as if I like looked and saw a company I would like quote unquote an evil corporation. It's like I'm not gonna apply for them. I don't want to work for them. So like in my interviews, I was always asking you like, oh, what about like your chair, like the company's charitable donations, work in their actual communities and stuff. So I always tried to care about that and being picky in general. So I've worked now for Voya, and now I'm working for a company called FMC, and in both, there's just been such a good culture because when you seek out the companies that kind of at least put out into the world like, hey, we're trying to care. Um, you'll find people who work there who are this kind of all looking for the same thing that you are for the most part. So it's just nicer environments. And so, yeah, I mean, being picky is really the biggest career risk, other than, I guess, not going right into the law, but I kind of explained how that happened. So that wasn't calculated. Um, so yeah, it's really just being picky. It's worked out. I loved both places now. I've worked since graduating in the cultures.
Yeah, that's amazing. And it shows your character because I know people again who just do it for the money. So it's good that you instill your values and make sure it's there in every company. And one big thing that I've heard across the board through lawyers, anyone in between, is that how important company culture is and the environment you're in. So it's great to see that you've achieved that through your current workplace and your current company that you are in. Okay. Yeah. My next question is that for law students or early career attorneys who feel like their path doesn't look traditional or they don't think that they can achieve it, essentially, what advice do you give them?
The same advice I got from um, actually the person who told me the MBA is the equivalent of what a bachelor's degree used to be. They connected me with another friend of theirs who was a finance attorney in Wall Street, and he told me just keep your eye out for opportunities. Like so, there you're gonna if you Google it, you'll see just like, oh, this is the path you need to take to get to law school. You go to undergrad, you get one of these, like I don't know, 3 degrees, whatever it is, um, and then you go to law school. You join this journal, you get these internships, and then you graduate and you want to get at one of like at each school. I'm sure will have their own different like, hey, this is the law firm you're shooting for coming out of this school. It's like just keep yourself open to opportunities because if you are going to stick that rigidly to a plan, you might just ignore stuff that comes along. And I don't recommend doing that because um, it's like opportunity is good luck, but it's also being open to what comes your way and accept and turning things down because you're shooting for something bigger, you know, doesn't always work out. Often for most people, it doesn't work out because you're shooting for the most competitive thing. And, you know, realistically, not everyone's getting the most competitive thing. Um, so just, yeah, keep yourself open like follow like so many of the most successful people I've talked to in life have just followed essentially the path of least resistance and just hey that's an opportunity I'm going to go down it and you'll find as you do that you'll grab experience that helps you down the road with maybe as you swerve back to more traditional stuff so yeah I would do that because if you just search for what you're supposed to do you might miss out opportunities that make you happier or more successful down the line.
Yeah, definitely. Like you said, being open-minded and grabbing every opportunity you can, whether it be in college or high school, is one of the most important things, and I'm sure it got you where you are now. You mentioned having like a mentor who was, I think you said Wall Street or something. So how did mentors play a part in your life?
They've been great actually so far. If you, I mean, like you look for people who are like, I guess I look for people who are kind of social. Like I've said, I'm a little awkward. I know I've stumbled over my words here, so it's just like kind of about finding people who are, for me, who cut through the bullshit, for lack of a better term. It's like, yeah, you can go into law school. Like when if you go to law school, you go meet plenty of people who are like really haughty about it, and it's like, no, the law was just made by people, right? Throughout all of history, it's hundreds of years old, or built on hundreds or thousands of years of history. But like, it's all just made by people. So I've always sought out mentors, I guess, who have that approach and the more practical, like, hey, we're all people doing this. So maybe that's a self-fulfilling prophecy, but that's kind of all my mentors have kind of guided me towards that. Be practical. You're working in the real world. Um, so that's kind of how it's helped. And yeah, just find someone you also enjoy talking to. Don't just go for the best one because you'll learn more if you have open conversations.
Exactly. And having those type of open conversations with people who are kind-hearted and empathetic is what we really yearn for in life in general. And I hope one day I hope to find a mentor that gives me all the advice that I need.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely. So if you could go back to your law school self for a minute, just envision, what is one piece of advice you would give?
Um, it's all for your first job, so don't stress it too much. It really is. So, like, your entire law school resume is built to get your first job, essentially. And then after that, it's like, okay, your real resume is what gets you your next job. So it's like, don't stress it too much. For me, that kind of ends up being, well, you didn't go into law right away. So maybe not the best advice for every student going to law school, but I'll say like the law from like the 1800s is cool and all, and it gives you context, but you're not going to cite case law in most of your life if you're not in a courtroom. Um, and take an evidence class. I didn't, which was a mistake because the bar exam is full of evidence. So try to take as many bar exam based classes as you can. Most law schools require them, but yes, take bar exam based classes. It helps.
Yeah, that's great to hear, and that's such a wonderful thing because again, every point, I'm sure, in a lawyer's or in a house counsel's person in life is stressful and filled with obstacles that you don't know if you can overcome in those early stages. So it's fantastic to hear that in the end everything will work out, which is what I've heard from many people. And also talking about the really minute details about having classes, and because I'm sure we all have our regrets when it comes to those type of things.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, so this has been such a great conversation. Thank you so much for sharing your story and being so open about what it's really like to build a non-traditional legal career. And to everyone listening, thank you for tuning in for Lawfully Told. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who might need to hear that there's more to law than just the nitty-gritty. We'll see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Take care.